Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're coming to the tail end of day 3 at CISO Forum Canada. And I want to begin this session by bringing forward a little quote. It says that the challenges that we endure today give us the strength that we need for tomorrow. I'm going to begin by asking Mayor Shaun Collier from the town of Ajax to say a couple of words about how Ajax has been fighting through the pandemic that we find ourselves in and using innovation and community engagement as a mechanism to prepare the community for life in the new normal, life in a hyper-digitized world. Mayor Shaun Collier from the town of Ajax, I'm first going to turn it over to you. Mayor?
Thanks, Ellie, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's a little humbling being with such a distinguished panel, so thank you for having me. I'll just go back a little bit. Since the summer of 2019, Town of Ajax has been working very hard to bring cyber awareness to our town and to our region. And we've hosted several things like workshops for seniors to an ethical hacking workshop for youth, and been actively ensuring that our community engages in online safety. We attended the CISO Forum last year in August and met with many other leaders and encouraged them to come to Ajax. And since then, we brought in a virtual reality escape room. In cyber, we deployed a state-of-the-art cybersecurity studio, and also we've hosted 3 tabletop exercises called Breach the Keep. We've been becoming a training and hackathon hub. We've hosted Canada's first ever certified threat intelligence analyst course and ran an in-person global cyber Olympics competition with recently finished the collegiate pen testing competition with RIT, IBM, and CyberX. So suffice it to say, we're becoming a bit of a hub for all things cyber. And due to COVID-19 and the new normal, we're now actively encouraging solutions to deliver digital healthcare. We have collaborated with various companies, specifically from Durham College, like ConnexHealth, to deliver e-health services such as door-to-door digital delivery of medications. So we can and will do more. I'm excited to join today's panel to learn and explore how we can help innovate. And Ali, back over to you.
Thank you so very much, Mayor Shaun Collier. And as Satya Nadella said at the very beginning of this pandemic, we're about to see in 2 months, 2 to 3 years worth of innovation. And my panelists today are going to be talking about this dizzying spade of innovation that we've been going through. You've often heard me say this, that innovation is not about what's the next product that goes onto the shelf. It's about, do we need that shelf altogether? And my panelists today are individuals who've asked that very question in very, very challenging times. Mayor Collier, before I introduce the panel, I want to thank you again for not only being a fantastic mayor, but more importantly than that, being a friend to my team at Durham College. As our audience knows, I lead both the AI Hub as well as the Center for Cybersecurity Innovation, and much of what we have done has been because of the friendship and support from the town of Ajax and the leadership of Mayor Shaun Collier. He's the kind of individual that doesn't necessarily say, hey, here's a little bit of funding and go and get something done. He comes forward and says, how can I help you get this done, and let's go together. Mayor Collier, thank you so much for everything that you've done and all the support that you've given us. For our audience, I'm going to take the next 5 minutes or so to have our panelists introduce themselves to you, with the understanding that today's topic is going to be about what is telemedicine, but more importantly, what is it not? And through understanding that dichotomy, we'll break away from binary thinking around what are some of the cybersecurity opportunities, less so challenges, that if we address them correctly, we can actually see a revolution in how healthcare is being delivered, not just in our province, but nationwide. Firstly, I'm going to introduce Medha Saraiya, who is the CEO from ConnexHealth. Once again, a shout out to the team at CyberX for ensuring and trying at all times to maintain diversity on all of their panels. Medha, I'd like you to introduce yourself with, of course, your name, your title, and what excites you about healthcare today. Medha?
Thank you, Ali, and thank you, Mayor Collier, for the kind words. My name is Medha Saraiya, as Ali mentioned. I'm the CEO of ConnexHealth. And what excites me today is the digitization of healthcare and how we are able to take the healthcare and make it accessible to all, make it available to all, and make it universal. That is what's exciting me right now.
And I think that universality of healthcare also speaks to transparency and accountability in how we deliver services, which is a perfect little gate to open through and let Ali Mohamed into this conversation and have him introduce himself. Ali, for the purpose of our audience, I did do a quick Facebook fact check, so I guess it is legit. You did make your entry into the world first, so I'm going to refer to you as Ali the First, so that people don't get confused between me and you as we share the same first name. So Ali the First, please introduce yourself, the title that you take at Lyte Medical Clinics, and tell us one thing that you're working on today that's definitely keeping you on your toes. Ali?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks, Ali. I'm Ali Mohamed from Lyte Medical. I'm the CEO there. And for us, our focus has always been handling patients' needs and being able to get them access, secure and safe access to doctors. Right now, our focus is building out a platform that makes that interaction even easier. And every day it keeps us on our toes. Technology is something that evolves daily. And with that, so does our team and our methods of handling healthcare. So it's exciting, it's new, and it's definitely a space that I continue to look forward to be building into. So it's a great place to be.
Absolutely, and I'll add for our audience that Lyte Medical Clinics is not only working within Ontario, they're working Canada-wide, and they're growing. And you're going to hear in the next 55 minutes or so, growing has its challenges. Growing is painful, but out of that pain, a lot can come out of it. And I look forward to engaging with you a little further, Ali Mohamed. I'm going to turn it over now to Kashif from UHN. Kashif, thank you for everything that you've done on the Cyber Exchange Advisory, on the CISO Forum Advisory Group. You've been an ambassador for cybersecurity practices across Canada and always come forward with supporting us in our work. Kashif, can I have you introduce yourself, your title, and tell us a little bit about how you're seeing the future of digital healthcare? Kashif?
Yeah, so thanks so much, Ali, and it is great to be here. It's a great event that you guys put on. So my name is Kashif Parvaiz, and I am the Chief Information Security Officer at University Health Network, largest sort of hospital group within Canada. As part of that role, I'm responsible for all things cyber and keeping the patient records and all of our data that we have secure. And one of the things that our team is working on, I think a lot of the hospitals in the area are working on, is the shift, the digital shift towards telemedicine, and it's definitely taken our group by storm. We've got a whole team working on our digital health and sort of virtual care strategy right now. And then there are it is a great enabler. I think it gives a lot of benefits to people who are maybe marginalized or people who have difficulty getting into the hospitals, as well as sort of alleviating wait times and that sort of thing. So it is a great initiative. With anything that's great, there are some areas of concern, and one of them is the privacy side of things, as well as the compliance side of things. We are dealing a lot with patient data out there, and so we need to really take a step back and ensure that we're providing these services correctly.
Fantastic, and I really want to come back to this aspect of privacy. And we always talk about the known unknowns, but even the unknown unknowns, and we're moving into a territory which has increased some of our levels of risk. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that as we go. We have two more panelists to engage, and I'm going to start off with Rob first. Rob, your name, your title, and tell us about one thing that's keeping you up at night. Rob?
Sure, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. This is my first opportunity to work together with the team at CyberX, and I'm certainly excited about it because this is a passion area, like I'm sure everyone on the forum today. My name's Rob Davidson. I'm with Pacific Blue Cross. I'm the Director of Security Services and the Chief Information Security Officer there. Pacific Blue Cross is really about the health and welfare of British Columbians, but I get the opportunity to try and make a lot of that real with digital technologies. And this is a great panel to be on because it talks about how you take something like that, which is a great idea, and make it real. The thing that keeps me up at night, and that's a tough question because anybody on here who thinks about security probably has a lot on their plate. It is that privacy and the what if factor. We hold health data for important members. And so that responsibility is onerous and something we take super seriously.
And I do appreciate that perspective as well, because what it is pointing us out to is the context around which we deliver healthcare in a digital environment. And more importantly than that, it's also reminding us that security doesn't just sit in the laps of IT alone. There are a lot of other players that feed into this. So thank you very much, Rob. And lastly but not the least, Scott, another ambassador of all things cybersecurity here in Ontario, but in Canada as a whole. You do some very important work. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do and give us a little bit of an insight into how security is factoring more and more into the delivery of healthcare. Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Ellie, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm Scott Currie. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at SickKids Hospital here in Toronto. Similar to Kashif, we share a lot of the same concerns, but I'm really excited about what the opportunities that telemedicine is bringing forward to us. And certainly security plays a huge role in thinking about how do we ensure that we're able to deliver these services in such a way that we maintain the privacy and security of our patients' information. But the opportunity, I think, is such that it's really exciting for us as we move forward with this, and the ability to extend our reach of clinical care well beyond the four walls of the SickKids campus and be able to reach our patients and our families throughout the province. So I'm looking forward to the continuation of this, and obviously ensuring as we go forward that we're making security a huge priority in all of these things.
Fantastic, and thank you very much. One of the things that I'll tell our audience is that when you're thinking about innovations in digital healthcare, there are no finish lines. There are only milestones that get marked, and then you're on to the next best thing. But it's important for us to understand, what do we mean when we talk about telemedicine? Medha, I want to start off with you. I know you can easily define what telemedicine is, but you have a unique perspective on defining it by what it's not. Medha, what is telemedicine and what is not telemedicine?
So, Ali, for me, telemedicine is not about meeting a doctor on the Zoom call. It is not about showing your symptoms or doctor assessing you on a Zoom call. As I'd mentioned about earlier, it's about accessibility. It is about reaching your client. It is about creating the infrastructure that can help people get the care when they need it. And as some of my other panelists have mentioned, it reduces wait time. It reduces leave it. It makes it more accessible. And that is what it is to me. And just like telemedicine, also other delivery services that go with telemedicine. For example, our medication delivery service that Mayor Collier mentioned about, it's about accessibility. It's about getting the people what they need when they need it.
And I think the key there that you've mentioned is time. And Ali Mohamed, you've been a very strong proponent of this. And exactly to quote what Medha said, is that your service is not about, hey, how can I get a doctor and a patient to meet across Zoom? You've been an individual who's been looking at how do we actually rethink that entire telemedicine approach, and how do we rethink the interaction between a client, between a doctor and a patient. The Canadian saying, right? The medium is the message. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and how you've been thinking through and delivering and deploying telemedicine services. Ali?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ali. So for us, one of the things that we wanted to focus on is getting back to preemptive healthcare. We believe that telemedicine can actually enable preemptive healthcare and then start taking away the burdens on hospitals and doctors. We noticed, like with some of our patients alone, that they would tell us that it'd take a week for them to see their family doctor. It would take 6 months to see specialists. It would take this enormous amounts of times to be able to physically go see a doctor. Now, in that time, there could be other symptoms. There could be other issues that come along. And as those continue to snowball, that patient is getting sicker, and then the burden goes on the healthcare system. What we want is patients to get a cold, catch that first sniffle, and see the doctor. Let's start attacking the problem when it initially starts, and having access, secure, safe, and quick access to the doctor, like Medha saying, will allow patients to feel want to take back more control of their health. A lot of people, especially in the GTA, as we all know, going to see a doctor is an hour in traffic, 2 hours in the waiting room, another hour to the pharmacy, and then an hour home for a lot of these things that we could have done over the phone, over telemedicine, using a secure platform like OTN through our EMR system and our platforms. So we really do want to continue using this to empower patients to not wait till it's too late, or not wait till they're overly sick, or not wait till they're rushing to the hospital, but see the doctor today. And let's start attacking these issues before they get out of hand. And we believe that this could be the future in enabling patients to stay out of hospitals and go seeing specialists earlier and getting through a lot of the stress that they have right in the minute it starts.
I really like this aspect about the timeliness of it that both Medha and yourself have brought up, and the point at which that connection is made. There's an aspect about service delivery that we refer to as the last mile. I'm going to come to that last mile element of service delivery a little later on, and I want to bring in our CISOs into this conversation. Kashif, we'll start off with you, we'll go to Rob, and then we'll go to Scott, because I have 3 layered questions that I think will speak to what we've just heard in terms of the platform set up for us by Medha and Ali. Kashif, let's start off with you. No institution is an island. You've got to work with different vendors. ConnexHealth and Lyte Medical Connects, I'd like to call them partners. Both of them work with Durham College in some of their development work as well. You've got to work with different partners. Is that a challenge from a security perspective? Because managing the security postures of these vendors and partners can be particularly challenging and not a risk you're willing to take in healthcare. Talk to us a little bit about the vendor management piece, Kashif.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even before getting into telemedicine, just generally running a hospital, running an acute care facility, you've got lots of third-party vendors out there managing various types of equipment, and I'll be honest, in the security side of things, security was always at the back end, an afterthought, if you will. And so over the last little while now, we've actually changed a lot of our contractual obligations as well as our language, even before you actually get on. And if we in the procurement process, we actually have injected a lot of security questionnaires, a lot of security due diligence, threat and risk assessments, and privacy assessments that have actually been embedded now into the overall procurement process. So it's all done upfront, and there's actual sort of legal obligations for the vendors now to go and do things like provide secure configurations, update these types of the type of equipment that's out there on a regular basis. Whereas before in the previous days, it was all functionality was everything, and then security, the non-functional requirements were nothing. So now it's kind of like there's a better balance now. Coming to telemedicine, it's the same thing. So what we're doing is, yes, there are a number of players in the landscape now. But one of the things is also to, strategically is one of the other things is you want to, although there's going to be a few key players out there, you still want to minimize the landscape as well. You can't have, dozens and dozens of vendors out there. You need to sort of see where maybe you can have a larger portfolio with 1 or 2 or 3 key vendors, and you want to minimize that. But then with those vendors, you still need to hold them to account. So yes, you have some levers like your legal side of things, but you also have that allows you to do other sort of technical assessments as well. So in those legal obligations, you may be able to do regular assessments, third-party assessments of those particular vendors, because as you just mentioned, Ali, is that you're only as secure as those third-party vendors as well. You yourself could be a great, amazing security on your own premises, but if you're relying on them, especially for a business process like that, it could bring you down as well. So you definitely need to spend the time there.
Thank you for that perspective, Kashif. And I want to work with that a little bit. And we have about 100 plus folks who are listening, and some of them come from the vendor and partner community. I know we have folks from VMware, Carbon Black, we have folks from CrowdStrike, we have folks from SentinelOne, IBM, AWS, you name it. And one of the things that I think Kashif has portrayed really well for you is that there's not an opposition to sort of work on digital health solutions with our vendor and partner community. Kashif's really portrayed that message that if you want to go fast, you can go alone. You want to go far, you got to go together. But there are certain standards and practices that come in the way of that, and we'll unpack that a little bit as we move forward. Rob, speaking from the same train that Kashif set us out in, is this aspect of, along with telemedicine, comes this aspect of data and record keeping and digitizing a lot of record keeping. How much of a challenge is it to move from our traditional models to this hyper digital environment where almost everything, including silence, can be digitized? From EMR records to other patient records that we have, how much of a challenge is it to take it all virtual? Rob?
Great question. And to build on what Kashif and others have pointed out, it's a crown jewels for us. At the core, those digital records represent real people, and we try not to lose sight of it. And for the younger folks who are part of the panel with me today, they probably don't remember an important message that was delivered to us once back when online banking became a thing, and ATMs, in fact. Those things were once considered unsecure and things to be afraid of, and there was a bit of fear around them. And the reason I share that is we meet with our partners and with the vendors who are going to be the holders of these records in person now. This is not a time for any of us to phone in those conversations and just trust, although the tools are good, third-party assessments and tools that'll review your records management and follow best practices around those. Those things are all helpful, to be sure. But I want to meet with the vendors and partners. I want to have conversations so that everybody is on that same playing field and understands just the importance of what we were doing. And the reason it's like the bank machines of way back is that fear was something where you couldn't fall down. If you fell down, it probably would have set the industry back years and years. And the industry right now is going so quickly, we have to step back sometimes and accelerate with it and do great things. But around the digital records management piece, that's really the time where you get the technology pieces and the people pieces in the business and get them together so that everybody understands those crown jewels need to be protected. And I think that as we start to build maturity around these services, that'll just get better and better.
I really like your emphasis on the data side of things, and folks have heard me before in my talks on AI. I've said this repeatedly, right? That the importance of data can be best understood as this aspect of, in God we trust, everybody else must bring data. Data has that level of insight that can, if in the wrong hands, can result in a lot of different forms of breaches and leaks that can create detrimental impact within a society. So I do get your point about this need to make sure that it is protected, not just through one measure, but through multiple of them. And we'll talk about some of those measures as we move along. Scott, I know this question is definitely going to come from our audience, but I'll bring it up now because there's also an element of who the patient is. And in your work, not only are you dealing with very extremely sensitive cases, but you also have this aspect of managing a digital health solution, if you're doing one, where you have parents and their children engaging with a doctor. From a privacy standpoint, how much of a challenge does it bring up when children and young ones are involved in receiving care online? Scott?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is a bit of a different context for the way patient care is delivering when you're dealing with pediatric patients and obviously with families and caregivers. And it creates challenges well beyond what we face through COVID and well beyond what we face in an online world, down to the simple fact of determining whether or not a parent is allowed to visit the child in the case of a custody dispute, for example. So managing these types of challenges around access to information and access to care and proxies and parents and other caregivers is certainly a challenge that we've had to find different ways to overcome. First and foremost, we make sure throughout all of our processes that we have the right kind of consents in place to make sure that we're able to engage in these digital conversations, whether it's online teleconferencing, whether it's other types of remote data collection for the purposes of clinical care. And consent becomes a really interesting challenge in a pediatric population, because in some cases the patient can themselves consent for the types of access to the clinical services. In other cases, parents and others will need to. But I think it's something that we've had a fair bit of practice doing, because it's really an ongoing challenge with respect to pediatric care. But I think fundamentally this shift to digital services delivery and the ability of us to be able to interact with our patients more broadly, I think is bringing an awful lot of good to our patients. We've got a slightly unique scenario in that we are a specialty hospital, a pediatric care hospital, and really delivering specialty services, which means we have a patient base that covers the entire province of Ontario. And historically, patients would be coming in from Thunder Bay and Barrie and other parts of the province for simple clinic visits, that now we can move those much more remote and be able to access our patients in such a way that we don't have to bring them through that massive travel effort to get down to a clinic visit, where we would otherwise be able to deliver that virtually. Certainly it hasn't mitigated the need for people to come on site, but I think virtual care and the extended virtual care beyond the idea of the Zoom call with a physician, but really getting into how do we provide tools to be able to collect clinical data from parents and children when they're at home. I think that's drastically changing our ability to be much more effective and timely in the way we deliver care. And I'm really excited about what the future is going to hold, because the reality of where we are now with telemedicine is the genie is out of the bottle. Similar to your opening comments, Ali, we had one of our physicians say at the beginning of COVID that we've done more in telemedicine in 2 months than we have in the previous 10 years, and it was not for lack of trying. there's real opportunity for us to have drastic clinical impacts across the province. And the genie is out of the bottle, and I'm excited to make sure that we drive innovation, but we drive it in a safe, secure manner that ensures the privacy of our patients and make sure that we're able to deliver the best possible clinical care.
Thank you so much for the genie in the bottle, and we'll follow that genie now to Mayor Shaun Collier, because one of the things, and I think you've touched on it really, really well, is this aspect of the informed consumer. About a couple of weeks ago, when I was talking to Ali Mohamed about the product that we're developing at Durham College and how we would pitch it to different users, he said something very profound, and that was, don't make a sale, make a relationship, make a customer. And Mayor Shaun Collier, through his work in the town of Ajax, has been making sure that the user, the customer, the patient is informed. Mayor Collier, can you talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing in the town of Ajax to prepare your community for using more digital services, the various workshops and awareness programs that you've been running for the entire community? Shed a little bit of light on that, Mayor.
Well, I'll do my best. And the first part of this was basically trying to educate myself, because I was very much and still very much a novice in everything cyber. So just a matter of getting more information and building those relationships. As you said, we've worked very, very well with Durham AI Hub and CyberX and a number of others, and it's working. But what we've done to try and educate the public is we had, for instance, earlier this year in May, Little Doctors Canada come in to speak of the topic of protecting themselves online while discussing and sharing healthcare information. So just trying to educate. We've learned a great deal from our programs and understood that people are the center of strong, resilient cyber practices. Since then, we participated in Cyber Exchange 1.0 and 2.0. We've run dedicated series of workshops for kids. We've now engaged a number of healthcare innovators, like Medha here from ConnexHealth is a good example, who, as you may know, in collaboration with Durham College, running a dedicated medication service delivery across Durham region. And in speaking with them, we've learned about how to deploy their services, and our economic development team is aware of the compliance frameworks required. We're meeting with other firms to discuss new services in telemedicine. And I think, as I started with, my approach is sort of trying to build community around the services and bringing the right people together, building those partnerships. You may also have heard recently we had an announcement from the provincial government of a new long-term care facility, another 320 beds, one of the fast build programs that's going to be open by, I think it's December 2021, which is a very, very fast build. And as well as another one with Schlegel Villages for 152 beds. So we're doing everything we can to try and help or promote here in town and move this file forward.
Mayor Collier, thank you very much for that. We've got a good 30 minutes to go, and I want to get into the weeds a little bit of telemedicine and the different tools that are out there to make it happen. And Ali Mohamed, I want to start off with you, because one of the things that you've constantly mentioned about the progression at your environment is that it's never perfection, it's always a work in progress. And one of the things that you've been doing is you've been creating these little demo environments for clinicians to test out and for different users to test out. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And then we'll go to Medha to get some results from the field and what she's seeing from a security perspective before analyzing that with our CISOs. So Ali Mohamed, talk to us a little bit about who's using it right now and what are these sandboxes? What do they look like?
Yeah, so right now it's being used within our own groups, so our own clinics. We have 2 clinic groups that we work with, as well as a couple other clinic groups that are trying it out. For us, like I was telling you, Ali, before, whenever we spoke, security was at the first and foremost for what we were doing. We've seen what happens when you don't take security or you don't put it to the highest regards with some of the other people in this space. So for us, we make sure that those test environments are extremely secure so people can see not only the current shape of telemedicine, but where the evolution is going, and they can continue to test and grow it out with us. But we're constantly doing stress tests, demo tests, having it go through the rigorous testing that it needs to avoid a serious scare. Again, we've always been a very patient-centric clinic. So for us, the patient data is more important than most of the things that we have going on. So we have been able to enable other clinics to test out our atmospheres, work in those little lots. And then from there, they're able to understand what works for them and what doesn't. And then we continue to evolve. Technology is a consistent evolution. So for us, it's always understanding what their needs are and making it consistently better. But the response has been great, especially when we can work with the needs of those clinicians and make sure that we're attacking exactly what they want. But again, behind it all, the security is the biggest thing, because one breach and we've seen what happens. So we spend a lot of time, our CISOs and our CTOs are consistently hammering away just to making sure we're okay.
And I think for our audience, I think it's extremely important to understand that as a CEO of a firm that's been around for a while and doing quite well, he's taken it upon himself to make sure that he's at the table for security conferences and at the table to discuss the posture of the company. Because as I said at the beginning, security doesn't just fall in the laps of IT alone. And that's another reason why Shaun Collier, for example, often comes on these sessions to show how it is a community approach to security. Medha, if it's okay with you, I just want to pause on the question for you a little and go to Scott, and then come back to you and then the rest of our CISOs. Scott, when it comes to deliveries of different products that have a telemedicine and a digital or virtual care bent to it, what are some of the standards and the, for lack of a better word, the compliance metrics that you use to assess if you want to move forward with a particular tool? Can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely, and I think it's it's something that's evolved over time and really become an extremely important part of how we approach any relationship with a vendor providing any service. And Kash touched on this a little bit, but it's a significant part of all of our upfront procurement processes where security is now simply part of the conversation. Historically, healthcare IT has been sort of lagging a little bit from a security perspective, which is, build it first, secure it later. And we're really trying to shift that narrative in everything we do. And certainly this move to more digital services and telemedicine has changed a little bit the way we had to approach this, because now much more than ever before, the cloud is coming into play. We're starting to look at vendors that are bringing in medical devices with data and processes hosted in the cloud, which really requires us to ensure that there's a significant amount of diligence that we put in place. At the end of the day, notwithstanding all of the various compliance standards that are out there, we as a hospital need to hold ourselves to the highest possible standards. And in doing so, we really make sure that any vendor that we engage is meeting that bar that we've set. And part of that involves the legal agreements, which is extremely important because that allows us to have some teeth behind some of the requests that we put forward. But our process will typically involve several meetings with the vendors, technical teams, understanding the data flows, how data moves from us to them and back, understanding their technical architecture, their security controls, and then really an expectation that not only are we having those conversations, but that they've undergone some degree of audit. We simply can't rely on the word of a vendor that they've done exactly what they need to do. And so we really do fall back on making sure that we have a foundational understanding of what the technology platform that we're looking at is and can do. And then supporting that with some sort of reasonable assessment to validate the types of controls that we expect to be in place are. And that's a really important part of what we do, and actually gets baked directly into those legal agreements. So this isn't just an upfront process when we negotiate an initial contract, but we build in an expectation that on an annual basis or a biannual basis, depending on the service, that these vendors are continuing to provide us feedback on the evolution of their controls and continuing to provide us evidence that they are in fact securing our data to at a very minimum the degree that we would secure it ourselves. And very often we will hold them to even a higher standard than what we would ourselves do.
And I think this is extremely important for some of the startup folks that are listening to this session as well. There are a lot of, especially in Ontario, we've got a significant growth of youngsters who have gone into entrepreneurship, who are developing different tech tools. And I cannot underestimate how important is it to go and get a privacy impact assessment done, to go and get certain validations against you. And there are services that you can utilize. And I encourage you to go on cyberexchange.ca and speak to individuals like perhaps Kat Kood or Debbie Reynolds, who could help you with some of those things, because those statements go a very, very long way against the product that you're trying to bring forward. Medha, I want to come to you because, as I mentioned earlier on, and Scott's really eloquently brought it together, is this aspect of people. And I've said this many times that, you don't build products, you don't build businesses, you build people. They build the product, they build the business, they build the service. One of the things that you've been focusing a great deal on when delivering virtual care and digitized healthcare is the aspect of training your staff. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've learned as you've deployed the delivery service for for medication and how you've had to deal with your staff. And this also ties in to a question where somebody has asked, do your staff have to get certified to even just transport goods from a pharmacy to the patient? Medha, over to you.
So just like everyone else has mentioned, you have to have security by design built into your products. And that concept we've not only built into our applications, but we've also built in with our team. So there is the audit trail that needs to be done on a regular basis. There is certifications that they have to go, as you mentioned, to be able to deliver the goods. There is continuance. You have to make sure everything, they understand security where they understand privacy. As some of my staff, when they are delivering medication, they might get access to some personal information. They have to realize what privacy means. They have to realize what security means. They have to understand how to safely maintain people's private data. As everybody else said, it all comes down to data and how we secure our data. So just to give you an idea, some of the things that we've done at ConnexHealth is we make sure that we don't have any open IPs. We make sure that we are doing testing on a weekly basis. We make sure everything, there's encryption on every level of our platform. We make sure even the data that's been transmitted between us and our drivers is encrypted and it's secure. So these are some of the measures we've been taking.
Speaking on those real technical elements that you've had to deploy, is a question that's come in that I'm going to ask to both Kashif and Rob. But Kashif, we'll start off with you. And this is this aspect, and I feel like this is coming from a security practitioner's background, and that is you've kind of been left with no choice in some cases where you have to deploy some items of your service virtually. How has this put a strain on your budget, and how are you managing these new costs that have come up relatively unexpectedly? Kashif?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a fair question. I think that really, yes, there's going to be some upfront costs. Yes, there's going to be some, implementation costs and that sort of thing, and that's been taken into account. I think that the way that it's the most financial, our CFOs and other sort of people on the finance side have looked at this in the long term. I think that every hospital needs to look at it in the long term. Is that the types of sort of advantages that you get in the long term once this is all deployed, the lower wait times, the better access to beds, better patient delivery, that'll actually end up saving you money in the long term. So yes, it's an upfront investment. Yes, there's a bunch of testing that's involved, and that sort of thing. There will be cost, but yeah, I guess the total cost of ownership and the TCO, if you get into financial terms, you'll end up actually saving once this is actually fully deployed, and it's a benefit for everybody.
Thank you for that. And you know what? One of the things that you've brought up has been kind of resonating with our crowd as well, where they're telling me that, hey, we've tried to define what telemedicine is, but let's define a little bit about what healthcare is. And one of the steps I've taken is that I'm explaining it as a patient and a doctor relationship, but it's a little bit more than that. And I think, Rob, this is the perfect stage to bring you into this, is that when we think about digital healthcare and when we think about telemedicine, it can also apply to other services like ambulances. It can also apply to other services that don't necessarily have to happen within the clinic site. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the innovations that you're seeing and the security challenges besides privacy that come up with some of this when services are delivered virtually anywhere? Rob?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. The great advantages that Kashif and Medha and others have pointed to, those things, mother is the necessity of invention. And we've accelerated on this huge pace over the last few months, probably driven by COVID and other things. The good news is people have been working hard to solve some compelling problems for a while. And some of the security tools that people have built in, things like centralized digital identification, single sign-on, and multi-factor authentication. Those are the sort of things we look for when we do those security assessments. The things that give us compelling comfort that we can offer a broad range of services. So for us, in a lot of cases, we start with the notion, and it's been mentioned a couple times, it's more than seeing a doctor over Zoom. I think what we're trying to do is centralize a set of things, and provincially, there's been great work done that's interesting around the notion of a centralized health portal, where one ID will work across a breadth of services. And then we'd like to take some of those things and be able to securely expose them through a mobile application. So you can really scroll through and see what it is you want almost from a menu. But obviously, we're not doing any of those things without security being top of mind and foremost. And I think all of the folks on the panel have mentioned that multiple times. It's important to also note the question that was asked about this acceleration to these services. Does it mean we have to? I never think in security we have to do something. We always have the opportunity to feel good about it, and that's an important step. We had to feel good about virtual services, and it's a lot about meeting with the folks and understanding the underlying technical pieces. So not only are the tools there to make some of these happen, but I think the maturity comes from the fact that it's well monitored services, and you have a way to understand what people are doing and audit these processes. It's all of that that's building up the maturity, and that's the breadth of services that'll come along. As that platform builds out, I just expect this to grow into more and more areas. Ambulance services, as you mentioned, is just one good example.
Thank you so much for that, Rob. And we're getting a lot of questions, so I might deviate just a little bit from the script that we had. And I'm going to go back to Scott here. And Scott, in my previous sessions, I've always said this, right? Like a pinch of prevention is far better than and far outweighs a pound of cure. And it's this aspect of, and you spoke a lot about accountability and transparency, but it's also this aspect of ownership. Do you feel that CISOs, and I'll read this verbatim, tend to feel that they want to build whatever telemedicine products, they want to have it in-house as opposed to farming it out to a third-party vendor? Does that afford you more ownership, or are you starting to see some loosening of that kind of mentality? Scott?
I would definitely say that there's quite a bit of loosening, at least within our organization. Very rarely do we begin from the premise that it's better for us to build it than to buy it, because at the end of the day, we're in the business of delivering healthcare, and our core expertise is around ensuring that we're in a position to be able to serve our patients and deliver the kind of clinical care that they expect. We're not a development shop, and we're not set up to be a development shop. And so I really do think that a lot of the innovation, and there is so much innovation happening in the healthcare market right now, is really driving organizations to start thinking beyond what we would do within our own four walls. And really a lot of what we've tried to do over the course of this pandemic, and even well before that, is really about looking for how do we partner with vendors in the space that can help to deliver the type of services that we need. And we really do try to take an approach whereby we create rather than 15 targeted and very specific applications, looking for a vendor that can provide potentially multiple services for us. How can they support multiple streams of our clinical care? And telemedicine's not necessarily directly aligned with that, but when we start thinking about clinical workflows and vendors that work with us on being able to deliver those clinical workflows, the more things that we can do collaboratively with vendors, whether it's from a data perspective, an ML perspective, a medical device perspective, it really enables us to embrace the innovation in a secure way without having to take on all of the burdens of maintaining operational support for something that we've had to build ourselves. So we really have taken the approach that telemedicine, and I mean that everything from the Zoom call to different types of data gathering for remote patient care, whether that's ventilation services, being able to do some EEG analysis in the cloud, and a number of other innovative type approaches that we've taken. We really are trying to look at how do we bring in the expertise to partner with us to deliver these services, and we select those partners with care to make sure that they can deliver what we need, but in a secure way.
And I think another important point that you've brought up is this aspect of the loosening of that ownership need and that willing to partner, is because all of this has a taxing implication on our infrastructure and the kind of data centers that we run, so on and so forth. Mayor Shaun Collier, you've been doing quite a lot through the Innovation Village to attract companies to come into Ajax to innovate. Can you just take 30 seconds to just let our audience know what is Innovation Village and how is it beginning to attract companies to innovate, especially in critical areas like healthcare? Mayor?
Well, Innovation Village was a concept that we started out with last year, and we've become developing. We took 4 existing buildings in our historic village area and sort of tasked them for different concepts. Like the fire hall, that again was vacant for quite a long time, is where the escape rooms are located and where CyberX is housed. We have the St. Francis Center where you are right now, which is a great opportunity. We spent $4 million on that building a couple of years ago, creating state-of-the-art You know, the lighting, the sound, the everything in that building is great for all the presentations, pitches, everything else that goes along with a tech hub type thing. We with trying to get seed money and angel investors, we took the old village library and we're going to be converting that for classroom training and that type of thing. And finally, the Quaker Meeting House, which is another one of the oldest buildings in Ajax, actually, that we've just finished completely renovating, is going to be used again for, that's where the actual workshop space is supposed to be. We're supposed to be converting that whole basement into office type space and meeting rooms and that type of thing. Unfortunately, that's been put on hold right now due to COVID. We're trying to pivot and think of different ways that we can still function and still move this forward, but at a distance. And that's the process. But how are we attracting is through building relationships, like what we've done with Durham College and AI Hub, with CyberX, with, you know, going, just reaching out to all of our businesses. We have a lot of businesses here, very large organizations, Gordon Foods, now Amazon, Loblaws, a lot of others. And how can we work with them on the technology side? And how can we help them through Innovation Village to develop their ideas? For instance, logistics isn't just trucks anymore. It's robotics, it's drones for accounting inventory. It's a lot, so much more than just trucks and moving products. So we're trying to enable them, and we're hoping that Innovation Village is going to be the key for that.
Thank you for that, Mayor Collier. And partly due to your work, we have folks like ConnexHealth and Lyte Medical clinics, not just innovating with folks in Ajax, but innovating across Durham region. And I know Kashif had also had the chance during Cyber Exchange 2.0 to visit the St. Francis facility. And it goes a long way in making sure that, as you mentioned very eloquently, that we can move forward and do so apart as well, given the times that we're in. We have another 12 to 13 minutes, and there are a couple of questions that are coming in around how we can actually, through telemedicine, derive more insights. Ali and Medha, and Ali, we'll start with you and then go to Medha and then close up with the rest of our CISOs. Ali, it's this aspect of, with these engagements that you're having and the transactions, if I may call it that, between patients, between doctors and clinics, so on and so forth, you're gathering a lot of data. And telemedicine is hyperizing the amount of data that we're receiving. Is there anything that you're doing with that data from an AI and an ML perspective?
Well, that's why we reached out to you, Ali, is because going forward, we do want to start incorporating more AI into what we do to have better responses, to understand the needs, to understand what other patients have gone through in the past, and being able to understand what the future for those patients might hold by using past data. AI is going to play a huge part in what we do going forward. You know, things like at-home monitoring is stuff that we want to do with patients. We want to be able to take vitals virtually. We want to be able to incorporate all that. That's where the AI really comes in. And then the data off of that is something that we're going to be able to use to better understand our patients, what they're going through, as well as what their needs in the future will be. So working with groups like AI Hub and Durham College will allow us to understand that data better, but also be able to use that data towards making the patient's experience better, making the platform better, making the whole circle of care more complete, and we can actually tackle it as a whole now. So yes, it's an exciting time.
And just so that folks realize is that one of the aspects that we're also looking to do very closely with Lyte Medical clinics is this aspect of how do you optimize the service delivery. So for example, looking at the patterns with which a particular doctor has been booked, looking at those symptoms, and then making recommendations around staffing, helping different firms with understanding what their costs may look like through evidence-backed decision making. And there are a lot of controls that are in place there, especially from a security perspective. But one of them that I can tell you, or at least one set of them that I can tell you, really comes down to some simple things. For example, the principal investigators or the students that work with me not communicating through their Hotmail or not communicating through a non-corporate sanctioned device. Some very simple steps that you can take that gets you on that journey of consistently lowering your risk in delivering digital healthcare. Medha, I want to come to you because one of these aspects to the data that you've been able to gather and you've been able to review and drive insights from is that you were able to optimize the way in which you were delivering medication services. In fact, you were able to find the areas that needed it the most. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've been studying that data and how that's helped you in the Uber-like service that you're providing now for medication delivery for a lot of at-risk seniors, especially in the town of Uxbridge? Medha?
So, Ali, as Ali Mohamed mentioned, there is this AI part that even we are incorporating as the team at Durham College is helping us with that. That is more for data-driven, more for optimizing our routes, more for better care. But there is the other part. And in As a nurse, everything that we do is evidence-based. And that evidence-based, backed by real data, backed by what works, what does not work. How do we get to which client is more, what medication delivery is more crucial than the other? Understanding that, understanding how we implement some of these processes and how we secure them at the same time is where AI is where AI is one aspect, but it's also the individual aspect. It's always people, process, and then technology. So you have to have that people, process, and technology in place in the right order. It's whom we are servicing. Why are we servicing that? That is the basic key to what we do.
And I thank you for mentioning and re-underscoring that aspect about people. And this is now, we're going to go back to some of our CISOs and then come to concluding remarks. And Rob, I'll start with you, then go to Kashif, and then close with Scott. And Rob, it's this aspect of awareness. And whether you like it or not, agree with it or disagree with it, the pandemic has placed us in a position where you have no alternative but to, in many cases, for example, engage in a virtual meeting around care. How easy is it now, especially with our doctors and our frontline workers, given the strain and stress on the system, to actually make them aware of some cybersecurity best practices? How are you tackling that issue of awareness and getting some cyber hygiene education out to some of these critical frontline workers? Rob?
Yeah, great. So I think that there's two important elements. One is make it a win-win. There's so many powerful and compelling features. If you offer up to people something that really serves them well, I think there's an interest in them wanting to gravitate to use those services. So it's important to lead with what folks will get out of the benefits. But at the same time, cyber, although we're talking about it today and focusing on it, it's a general buzzword that people are starting to understand. It has matured to an extent. And I think given that, a lot of people are happy to have a conversation that includes what you can do to now leverage a service that's beneficial, but to be thoughtful around security. And sometimes it's those simple examples, like how you use a messaging service or how you think about the way you connect to be secure and to ensure that you're thinking about privacy first in this brave new world. Things like Cybersecurity Month and training events go a long way in terms of that.
I agree. And to our audience, one of the things in Ajax, that cybersecurity escape room, making that engagement fun, making it something that people want to be a part of. Even tabletop games go a very long way in engaging folks around cybersecurity. Two more questions, which I'm going to go to Kashif and then Scott, and then we'll conclude. And Kashif, this is an interesting one, and it's focusing on this aspect of, for example, and I'll speak it out blatantly, is you may have seen that there are certain robots that, for example, that Shaun Collier brought up, that actually now do virtual surgeries, that actually now do virtual, very invasive processes where the doctor might be sitting somewhere else. What kind of security threats do you see in those kind of really innovative applications? Kashif?
Yeah, no, it's it's definitely something that's been talked about in the medical industry for quite a bit of time now as well. And being a teaching hospital at UHN, we are on sort of the cutting edge of these. No pun intended, the cutting edge of these types of technologies. We have some of the sort of the leading surgeons in the world who come here to learn, and then they've been around everywhere learning about these technologies that are out there. And so, right now, actually, it's interesting you mentioned this because our phase one of our telemedicine and virtual care strategy specifically has that part out of scope. So any robotic stuff is out of scope for phase one. I think it's still a little premature to look at this, not just from a security perspective, but just overall how to deliver this kind of a service. It's still a bit early, I think, in the game. But it goes back again to, I think we talked about this at the beginning. It's because these robots are nothing more than sort of IoT devices, really. They're IoT devices. They're running on some sort of an operating system and that sort of thing. And so the fundamentals of security, and one of the things you have to remember is, all these cool things that are happening across the world. The fundamentals of security don't really change. Doing your analysis, your assessment, securing them, making sure that they're vulnerability free, all that sort of thing is really the way that you're going to secure everything. Thanks.
A variety of sectors. And Scott, I was curious to know, is there any other country whose digital health ecosystem really impresses you? Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think there's a lot to be said about healthcare across the world, and I think that there's definitely pros and cons to the way healthcare broadly is being approached. And I think if you leave aside sort of some of the fundamentals about how healthcare is funded as an institution within a country, I think what I find is that you really can find a lot of innovation throughout the world. Certainly out of the U.S., there's tons of innovation happening through a lot of their hospital systems. But I think broadly speaking, if you think about sort of what healthcare is in terms of the overall enabler within a country, I really found that a lot of the countries in Norway and that sort of part of the world there are really doing a lot of really interesting things. Not only with healthcare, but really getting into this idea of sort of national digital IDs and being able to, access the kinds of clinical services in very unique and different ways. The ability to deliver healthcare through a variety of different mechanisms, and access to various types of medication. So I really think that there's a lot of interesting things happening. I think from just a purely innovation perspective, certainly there's a ton happening in Canada, there's a ton happening in the US. But I think as a health system, a lot of the Scandinavian type countries really are doing an awful lot to ensure that they're delivering really quality healthcare for the entirety of their population. And they're really doing it in such a way that it ensures equal access for all people and that they're delivering it in a safe and secure way. So I'd probably point to them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Scott, I think you've also brought up this aspect, and as has everybody else, is that it's not just about the challenges with deploying digital healthcare, there are also costs that come with it. And different countries and different environments have different ways to fund innovations around healthcare. And that could be a subject for a separate conference altogether on how we fund innovations in healthcare. But Ali Mohamed, if I can give you 10 seconds before I make concluding remarks, is just that our audience knows is that some of the telemedicine services that you deploy are sanctioned and covered under OHIP, if I'm not mistaken.
100%. So all of our Ontario patients that see the doctor is completely free. We were able to get into the OTN pilot program in 2018 that allowed us to start seeing patients and be one of the first ever virtual clinics in Canada that were able to build through OHIP for that patient encounter. I think it's one of the things that set us apart. Our focus has always been patient first. We never believed in charging patients for access to healthcare. So that was a big thing for us. Yes, we're OHIP approved, yep.
Thank you very much. And there are more questions, but I do have to make way, so I got to give a break, and then we have another panel that's happening after this. So I will provide some concluding remarks, and I will ask our panelists that when we close, I do ask you to wait so we can debrief for 20 seconds in the green room. But what I will say to our audience is this, is that I hope you saw that with our CISOs out there, including our Mayor Shaun Collier, whether it's Mayor Collier, whether it's Scott Currie, whether it's Kashif Parvaiz, or whether it's Rob Davidson, these folks don't put the no in innovation. They want to have more innovation happen, but they do want to make sure that it's inclusive, that it's accessible, and that it's not just built for function, it's built for scale. And I want to thank Ali and Medha as well for giving us their time today, and more importantly, reminding us that yes, when we talk about healthcare, we need to be discussing how do we keep our healthcare system healthy and caring. Telemedicine, I tried to define it by what it's not, but the one thing that I'll tell you is my definition after listening to this session on security in healthcare is that telemedicine is not about how do we connect people or how do we connect a patient with a doctor. It's how do we keep them together? How do we make them more accessible to one another? And with that, I'm going to take your leave, asking our panelists to stay on for a little bit on. Thank you again, our wonderful panelists, for your time and your expertise. And to our audience, enjoy the next session that will begin in 30 minutes. Take care, everybody, and thank you.